Always wear safety glasses when working in the shop.
The safety glasses are over here by the sink in the white cabinet here. Make sure that you are grabbing a pair anytime you're working with tools or working near somebody who has the tools. If you are wearing glasses like I do, they should still fit over the top. And if you require a different pair, come see one of us and we will get you a pair that might fit better over your glasses. Or if you've got a smaller head and these feel too big, we can get you a pair that are a little bit smaller.
Wearing safety glasses means that when you are working, they are on your face. Safety glasses should not be on the top of your head while you are working. They do not do much good up there. And if you take your safety glasses off, you do not set them down on the lens. You always set your safety glasses down when you're not working on the upper frame or the blue portion, which is exactly where we place them when we set them back in the safety glasses cabinet. At the end of the day, all the safety glasses need to be placed back exactly where they belong, sitting correctly, or we will not be dismissed yet.
Report all accidents, injuries, and broken equipment to the instructor immediately.
Any accident we need to know about. When you tell us about an accident, we have first aid kit and safety materials and health materials up here in Poulos' aid kit. This includes gauze, bandages, disinfectants, cotton swabs, everything we need to make sure that you are safe if there is an accident or injury to occur in the shop.
We've both been trained in first aid, and so we are going to do our absolute best to keep you safe and to minimize any complications that may happen.
Only use tools for the job that they were designed for.
In the tool cabinet and throughout the shop, we've got tools that are designed for specific purposes. Please make sure that you're using those tools the way they were intended. What we don't want to do is grab, say, a chisel and try to use it as a screwdriver, or
a tri-square is not a hammer.
Okay. Please make sure you're using them for the purpose that they were designed for, and that way it allows us to work safely and it keeps us from damaging the tools. Keep tools away from the edge of workbenches when you set them down.
When you're working a lot, sometimes you're going to measure, then you're going to want to start cutting, and you're going to start moving, and you're going to forget that your tools are slowly being pushed to the edge of the table. Then you're going to come up, you're going to do something else, your tool's going to fall, and that is how we damage our tools. And if it's a measuring tool, then you just ruined that tool.
So make sure that when you're working, you're keeping things pushed towards the center of the table. Remember that when you're done with something, it should always go back where it belongs rather than sitting out on the table. But if we're still continuing to use that, make sure that we just keep those things close towards the center of the table rather than the edges where they can get bumped and fall off the table.
Wait for the tool to stop completely before you set it down.
If you're using an electric sander and you turn it on and you're sanding, when you shut it down, make sure that it has stopped vibrating completely before you set it down. Otherwise, it can vibrate on the table and it could even cause it to vibrate off of the table. If you're using one of the cordless drills, as soon as you let go of the trigger, it slows down to a complete stop almost instantly. If you're using one of the electric drills, something that's plugged into an outlet, those take a little bit longer to slow down and stop, but again, make sure it's stopped completely before you set it down on the table. Never unplug the cord of a tool by pulling on the cord.
Nope, that's not how we do it. When we do it, we will grab each end and then we will pull them apart. But we don't do it by the cord because you can pull the cord out from either the male or the female ends of the equipment or an extension cord.
When drilling deep holes, remove the bit frequently to clear out the hole.
Some different types of bits allow the material to come out while you're drilling, but a bit like this, a Forstner bit, when you're drilling, it doesn't allow the sawdust to come out of the hole, so once you go down, you remove material, and then you have to bring it back up out of the hole so that you can reduce the heat and the wear and tear on the bit and the damage you can do to the project that you're working on. Hold the tools firmly to avoid the tool from being pulled from your grip.
When you're using a drill, we want to make sure that we're holding it with two hands. In order to have two hands on the drill, that means we're going to need to have our piece clamped to the table or clamped into the vise. But you want to make sure that you're holding that tool so that if it gets stuck, it's not going to flip out of your hands. We want to make sure that you're holding that firmly, really got a good grip on it when you're doing any drilling with the drill, or even when you're using the sanders. Make sure that you've got a good firm grip on the tools so that they don't accidentally get dropped or fall out of your hands. Apply straight and steady pressure to the tool at all times.
A great example of this actually comes to the sander. When you're working with the sander, we often use two hands, as stated earlier. When you're working with the sander, you want to apply that straight and steady pressure so you don't wear odd ins and bends and curves and rolls into the projects that you're working with. But it also applies to drills. If you're drilling and you're kind of pushing and you're turning and you're not applying that straight and steady pressure, you're not going to get the accurate depth and precision that you should be trying to acquire in your projects. Check for tears and worn out sandpaper on portable sanders before you start using the equipment.
Anytime you grab one of the electric sanders, your first step should be to make sure that the sandpaper at the bottom is in good shape. If you see holes in it, if the sandpaper is torn on the edges or where it folds around, we want to make sure that we're getting that sandpaper removed and put a new piece on. We want to make sure that we're always sanding with a good piece of sandpaper so that we're not trying to push too hard or damaging anything by using sandpaper that's ripped and then we have that exposed pad underneath it coming in contact with your project. So make sure that we always have a good piece of sandpaper before you start. Start the machine before you put it to the work.
I take a drill with a Forstner bit that has these large teeth on it, and I put it into the material and I try to turn it on. It's going to tear up your project and it's not going to want to go. So you're going to want to get the tool to have momentum before you start and then work your way in. And the same thing goes for your orbital sander. Make sure that you start your orbital sander before you put it to the material or the project that you're working on.
Keep hands and fingers from the sandpaper when the sander is running. The sander doesn't know the difference between your boards and your fingers, so you need to. You need to know that this sandpaper can scratch your hands as easy as it does the boards. So make sure as you're sanding, when you turn the sander on and while you're sanding, that your hands aren't anywhere near that exposed sandpaper.
Do not overload the tools with excessive pressure. It will not work better and damages the tools.
The portable power tools, or any tools for that matter, are really designed to make your job easier. So if you're pushing real hard and you're putting a lot of pressure on something, it probably means that something's not quite right. So rather than pushing really hard, let's stop, reevaluate what we have for the tools, what's happening, and try to make changes so that those tools again are making your life easier and that we're not pushing real hard and trying to overcome any challenges by just brute force and pushing on stuff.
When you finish using a tool or piece of equipment, put it back where it belongs.
If we're leaving tools out and we're no longer using them, it creates a cluttered workspace and things are likely to get knocked off the table or bumped into. And when you have a saw, you've got a sharp blade here and we don't want people bumping into it. We don't want that thing here on the table where people are likely to get hurt. So we want to make sure that when we're done with something, we get it put away. It also makes it easier for people to find it when they need that tool.
Every tool has a home. When you look in the tool chest, we can see hammers, different types of saws, planes, measuring equipment, and so forth throughout. So when you put it away, just don't put it away anywhere. Make sure you put it back where its home is, like Mr. P said, so somebody else can find it.
If we're putting stuff away when we're done with it, it also makes cleanup way easier at the end of the class period or at the end of Club Sawdust. So we want to get those things put away as soon as we're done using them.
Do not interrupt other people while they are using the equipment.
When people are using the tools, it could be the hand tools or one of the stationary tools like the bandsaw or the drill press or something like that. We want to make sure that you're not interrupting them. We want them to be able to concentrate on what they're working on. And if you're interrupting, it makes it very, very hard for somebody else to focus on the project that they're working on and use the tools safely. Work at a safe speed and concentrate on what you're working on.
This rule ties in with a lot of different rules we have in the shop. But the idea is that you are focusing and concentrating on the work before you and that you're doing it at a safe and appropriate speed for the tool and the task at hand. This allows you to be efficient and safe within the shop for you and your peers. Keep hands away from the drill bits as you use the drill.
When you're using the drill, the first thing you're going to need to do is put the drill bit in. And anytime you are putting a drill bit in or taking it out of the chuck, we want to make sure that we're holding the back of the drill and we're spinning the chuck with our hands. What we do not want to see is trying to hold that chuck, turning it on, and trying to hold it in place to tighten up that bit. It puts your hands very, very close to the bits anytime you do that. The other thing is when we're drilling, if we've got a board that we're drilling into, we want to make sure that our hands aren't anywhere near it, because if that drill slips, we can get ourselves hurt.
Clamp the workpiece to hold it in place while working on it.
When you are doing any cutting or drilling, we want to make sure that you have your piece of wood clamped into a vise or clamped to the table so that it's not moving around as you're trying to cut. If we try to cut without it being in the vise, that board can move around and around and around. And so we want to make sure that we are not having that board slip. The vices are here to clamp our projects. We can clamp that project in nice and tight, and then we can have our hands free and away from the stuff as we're trying to work on it. This provides a nice stable base for our materials so that they do not get moved around while we're working.
Not all projects in the shop can be put in a table vise. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use your hand, that you should use your hands. We still have different kinds of clamps to make sure that you are working in a safe and efficient manner.